Sheriff's Department who were killed and wounded in a terrible shooting incident yesterday. Hard for all of us to even imagine it happening so close to home. They certainly are members of our first responder family, and we honor them. We pray for those that are wounded. They'll make a full recovery. Praying for their families and their loved ones and their friends as we observe a moment of silence at this time. Thank you. And now if you join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, we do have a full meeting. We have just about everyone here. Certainly have a quorum. And we'll move right into our agenda. Item 3 is approval of the minutes of the May 15th, 2025 regular meeting. I'll take a motion on the acceptance of those minutes.
Motion to accept.
And a second. Any discussion on those minutes? Any corrections, revisions? If none, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. All right, item 4 is old business. We'll go right into the report of our fire apparatus replacement committee. So first up, hand in hand.
Yeah, really no change in status, still waiting on the turn in the queue, so really have no update at this point. Yeah.
And we'll move to Lafayette for the ladder truck.
You think?
Yeah, okay.
Hurry up and wait.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could just interject. Been in discussion with both Bird in Hand and Lafayette about the potential of applying for a DCED local share account grant. And that grant would be used for both of those apparatus because there is no limit in that grant amount. And it would be working with Lafayette and Bird in Hand to write that grant and bring it to the board meeting on October 6th.
What is that through? What?
DCED,
DCED.
Department of Community and Economic Development.
And that takes a resolution from the supervisors to.
Yes.
We have the support of local government.
Okay, and old business item B is subcommittee reports. Anyone from public information to share any updates?
There's no update at this time.
No updates at this time. Okay. In finance, I thought finance, we were not meeting or we were thinking that was done because we did our agreements. Is that what folks from finance agree with? Okay. No comments about
I
finance?
think it was reading it very well correctly to have that committee kind of reconvene on a regular basis by our community rep from Lafayette, Rob Patterson, had brought that up.
Okay.
Last meeting is to bring that committee back up to speed.
All right, we have missed a few meetings, so we can make contact with those folks.
I think if we're going to do that, I would like to see as one of the members on that, a little bit of direction from this group of what exactly if we're meeting for, because my concern would be, I think we need some guy. I know when we at our last meeting, we kind of felt like we had done what had been asked of us. And so I'm not necessarily opposed to reconvening, but I think to reconvene and say, okay, well, what exactly are we doing here could be, I think we need a little, if we're going to do that, we would need a little more guidance from this committee, is my thoughts on that.
Any feedback on that point? Dave?
I sat on 1 or 2 of those committee meetings, the subcommittee meetings. I sat in on 1 or 2 of those. And I knew the discussion, there was some discussion around the increase in the annual funding allotment to the fire companies. Right now, we receive a 2% increase annually, and that's just not cutting it in today's world. I know that some of the members felt that there should be a overall monetary increase, and then also a percentage should be increased from the 2% to closer to the 4% maybe. That's the kind of discussion I believe that Rob Patterson was alluding to.
So that's the next to the agenda item of false alarms.
Right, there's a few items on the agenda, I think that might be discussion items for that committee. Paul, when you say, hey, the objective of that committee before was reached essentially in the apparatus plan?
Well, the apparatus plan and the annual funding, but basically the two sources of funding that the township has been providing us for going on, I don't know, a couple of decades now, was typically it was the apparatus replacement plan, and then also, I don't know what the technical term is, but the annual contribution that the township made. Those were the two, I think, objectives. Those are the two things that we worked through, came back with a recommendation. They were subsequently approved by this body and then also the supervisors. So I guess all I'm saying is if we're going to go back and start reconvening again, we kind of need to know. Now, if we're talking about going back and revising one of those, which it sounds like maybe the suggestion is, that's fine as long as this body is in agreement that that's, that's what they want us to study, or if there's other alternative things, but that's what I recall.
Mr. Chairman,
Feedback?
might I suggest that we table this discussion until after F under new business?
I agree, and we are into, budget time now, and really the committee has not done any work for the new budget. So even though it is September, I think you would be really talking about the next year's budget. I could say this from the board now, we're deficit spending again. We have to continue to find ways to save. We are trying to do that. We'll be meeting, we have an upcoming meeting on that with department heads and so forth. So, but there could be other ideas that come out of it. So I'm not opposed to that, but I do think there are items down on the agenda that might be that. So I agree. We'll continue that committee, and we have information on those that are there. Does that sound okay, folks? All right, and then number 3 is human resources. Anything from that committee to share with us? There are some other items on the agenda that might be relevant to that also. So, okay, we'll move to 4C, calendar activities. Tara, do you want to review those?
Sure. So in the packets that you received, there should be the calendar of activities for 2026. This is a draft, but so if you have any changes to propose, please let me know and we'll distribute the final one at the next meeting. Like that. Nope.
Good. All right. And now we'll move into the last item on old business, the 2024 false alarms. We do have the 2025 false alarms coming with the new business. Tara, I'll turn it over to you for a report on that.
Right. So Mr. Patterson brought this to the attention of myself at the last meeting. And I looked into this extensively since our last meeting. 2024 false alarm reports were sent to the alarms email that was established for those alarms, and they were entered into the police code system. That system cannot reset on a quarterly basis like the ordinance requires. So they were inputted into the CODI system and they were billed under the 23 ordinance, not under the current ordinance. So I found that out after the bills had already been sent for 24, after all of that went out. The amount that Mr. Patterson pointed out on the financials, I believe it was $150. That was actually funds that were received for 23 false alarms in 24. So all of the 24 bills went out prior to our last meeting under the old ordinance. That is a mistake. As your current township manager, I take full responsibility. Moving forward, 2025 bills, you should all have in your packets all of the 2025 false alarm fees that have gone out. And those follow the new ordinance. Q1 was sent out and Q2 has been sent out. Obviously, we're in the midst of Q3, so that has not been sent out. So if everyone could please use the email address for alarms and send the false alarms to reports to that address, they will get to me.
Chair.
Yes.
So I take care of the reports for Lafayette, and for 2024, I believe we had 226 false alarms. Granted, some of those were in Lancaster Township. I would say probably 15 in Lancaster Township. But this data here looks like it's way under, unless this is just what we bill. Okay, so in order to bill, the false alarms must occur within a frequency within a certain amount of time.
So under the prior ordinance, there were 3 free. And then you were billed for everyone after that. Under the new ordinance, your first one is $50 in the quarter. Your next one is $100. Your next one is $150, and it goes up $50 each time. And then at the next beginning of the quarter, it starts over. 50, 100, 150.
So is there anyone looking at increasing those fees? Is that part of this
That
discussion?
is part of this discussion. The other part of this discussion is whether or not we should have alarm registration. So, these are all points that we need to discuss tonight. We've taken a look closely at Manheim Township's alarm registration ordinance, and we are actually in line with their fees. Our fees match their fees, exactly. But registration, we do not register alarms, either residential or commercial. Now, their residential fees are slightly lower than our fees overall because ours apply to both residential and commercial. So that is something that could be considered. The board would look for the ESC's advice on how to structure that type of ordinance.
So the alarm registration, that would be an annual basis. And what would that do? It would be like $100 to register your alarm system. And then what would the follow-up be? Someone would come out and put a sticker on there saying that it's inspected and it's up to date.
So actually, if you have too many, the way Manheim Township works is if you have too many false alarms in a certain period, you get suspended. Your alarm registration gets suspended, and then you pay a fee to get out of that suspension. And if you have any alarms during that suspension, excuse me, then the fee is even higher. So if everyone wants to, I don't expect answers tonight. This is something we need to discuss further. This is something I'd really like you to look at in further detail, but I need ideas. I want and need ideas.
I think that some of the issue in the past was that the township did not have staff to actually follow through with everything. Is that going to be changing, or has that changed?
That has not changed. We still don't have a whole great deal of staff to handle this, but we're trying to make changes in the efficiency of how this is done so that we can follow up.
There what percentage of these bills are being paid, or are they overdue? Do you have any of that? I mean, I see there's a column here for paid, but I don't see any data there, so I'm curious
Yeah.
whether, are people paying this? And what are the consequences if they don't pay? How does that process work?
And so quite honestly, what you have in front of you is the 2025. So those have been sent out since your last meeting,
Okay.
right? Do they pay? Well, I can tell you I have all of these, which is actually not that much compared to how much we send out, but these are 2018 to 2023 bills that have not yet been paid, amounting to almost $2,000. And I didn't even pull all of the 24s because those that are $50, a single $50 bill is going to cost the township more in collection fees than the $50, right? So having this quarterly and subsequent increase in cost, it makes the bill more substantial and then makes it more collectible, if you will. There's a lot in here that are $50 and just quite honestly wouldn't be worth our time and effort. Now, the ones that are 300,
Yeah, that's the-
those are worth our effort.
So what happens there if, again, you send them a statement or a reminder and they don't pay? Is there are there repercussions or what's the
Right, so
process?
for some of these, we've actually gone to the landlord if they're a tenant situation, and we've indicated that it will fall to the landlord because it is their property. And we've managed to get some paid in that way, especially places like Tanger. In other cases where it's an individual homeowner, and we're just not gonna get paid. We're gonna have to write it off eventually. We can't keep carrying from 2018.
And it doesn't go to a bill collection agency. There's no liens, there's none of, if it stops there, basically.
So it's not considered a utility bill, so under the ordinance, we wouldn't be able to lien the property. And like I said, I'm sending a $50. It's gonna cost us more in fees than it is to.
Not necessarily. How
Are there consequences at neighboring townships that we could replicate?
By all means, but I've not done research in all of those. So that's why this is a conversation. That's why we need to put all the ideas on the table.
Jared, what does the registration piece have to do with that? Are we talking about registering for us to be able to service you for an alarm?
I know in Langston City, I have a yearly fee to have my alarm system for burglar.
And
You have to
what-
pay a fee that you don't get a permit and everything.
But what exactly, how would that benefit the township other than fee and more paperwork that somebody's gonna process?
So it's actually making sure that the system is functioning, right? Because there's some where we know the system is not functioning.
So that's one way that maybe those numbers go down, is that the alarm is working properly.
So as part of that, is the township sending an inspector or they're responsible to have it inspected and then provide the evidence that it was
That's
inspected?
Up for discussion. If that's made part of the ordinance.
I think that's number two is probably the better method for this township right now. Because without an inspection, maintenance and testing, IMT program, you do not really have closure. I don't want to mention any properties. You go for an automatic fire alarm, you look at their sprinkler and the tag has a date on it that says 1997, okay? There's nothing in the township that actually covers, it says that their sprinkler system must be inspected or up to code. So I like your idea of they need to prove they had a third party come, okay? But they still should pay a registration fee in order for the township to be able to provide the paperwork background.
Registration fee is also beneficial because then, if we have access to that information, we at least know which buildings have alarms. What we have now is data we've just collected on our own over the years.
What compels someone who has an alarm system to register that alarm system? How does that work?
They're not registered and there's a false alarm. It's an even higher bill.
Either that or they can't remain in business,
Or certificate of occupancy.
right?
Should it go that far?
Why is it reset every quarter?
That's the way the ordinance was written. It was revised to do that.
So let it go straight on through to the end of the year and you just keep on going once it's worth your while doing. That way they get up higher levels quicker. And so what is it, after 2 or 3 hours, they start getting the fines, is that right?
You get a $50 fine on your first alarm.
So they have 3 alarms. Yeah, places they might go there and, you know what I'm saying? We could take them up to a.
Still does beg the question, if there is no real enforcement mechanism, does that even really make a difference? That's where I'm going with all of this. An inspection, that all sounds great, could sound great, depending on what you're trying to achieve, but again, without the enforcement mechanism to back it up, I guess I'm still kind of going, well, okay, but now they've got $1,000 bill. you still can't collect it, we can't do a lien, but what's now what?
In Lancaster, they don't do it poorly, the fines go up very heavily. Oh, yeah. Because
Well, they
I know
have-
that from the hospital standpoint, and having some false alarms, because there was issues with the fire alarm system we had. I'm going back a couple of years or more, and it went up to almost like $1,000.
I think that the evidence of how are people collecting it that compels them to make the corrections they need. Now,
Yeah.
back to the registration piece, if they know, okay, you have to register your
Right.
alarm, or you could have your occupancy pulled, as, if that's what the mechanism is to do that, through a registration
So
process.
you got to list an alarm company and everything, who you have and who services it, and everything on the permit.
Mhm.
When you go, every year you have to put that information out regardless.
So we have a frequent flyer down Lincoln Highway, all the way at the end. We go there a lot of times and the alarm is set off with steam from the shower. And we have told them that they need to, number one, either replace the fans that they have in the bathroom because the facility is probably built in the 50s. Or they need to change those smoke detector heads out or heat detectors, change them out. But they do not take action on that. We have no powers to make them, we make suggestions, okay, in order to try and reduce the amount of automatic alarms that we go there for. The second problem is that the clientele that they have that stays there, a lot of them like to take the alarm off the wall, unplug it, okay? Then when we arrive, there's a trouble code on there, and we have to try and figure out where that trouble code is coming from. A lot of times they will plug that alarm back in because they know they're the culprit. And once again, we're at a loss.
It goes back to enforcement then again, though,
Yes.
because you could say that's a false alarm, or of some kind.
Sure is, yeah. And every alarm is, until you prove otherwise, every alarm is supposed to be a fire.
Any reactions from township on their collection process?
On that particular problem,
No, from the town, from Manic Township, I'm sorry. Did they give you any, how their collections go? Do they have the same problem?
I honestly did not.
Check though.
Yes, and another, and this, you get into the weeds on this stuff, but another question I would have is, currently, I don't know, how does define a false alarm? How is an alarm defined as false versus not false? So in the example he gave, if somebody actually removed the alarm and it activated, that's not necessarily a false alarm, or is it? And the same way with, if you're making popcorn in the room or you smoked a cigarette and, the alarm activated, well, the alarm actually is functioning, but is that considered a false alarm that's then billable, or is like, you see where I'm?
I hear what you're saying.
Because in that case, the alarm itself is, even if it was inspected, it's not malfunctioning, it's doing exactly what it's
So
supposed to.
if there's a reasonable cause for the alarm, okay? Reasonable cause, we do not rate it up. So in other words, there was a power outage, lightning strike, whatever, some car accident that took down the power pole, that does not get written up as a false alarm. Pretty much, if the human error will say, okay, that does get written up.
But the fact is, somebody knows if you're popping popcorn and you're gonna leave the bag, then intentionally leave the bag in the microwave. Because they know the smoke detectors, they're right nearby, so they set it off so they can have their fun. Some of the dormitories do that.
So really, we're talking about a nuisance alarm more than it's not a malfunctioning alarm, it's a
I'm
nuisance.
talking about nuisance, that's nuisance. There's a lot of times they do the popcorn.
And, we relied on the person for the township, the codes enforcement. I pretty much always relied on them to try and resolve, but I think their powers are limited too.
That is true.
Is there anything spoken that would enable you, the township, to bill with a very narrow scope, just for false, just for. And then you would have the discretion of defining which ones are going to get billed and not, similar to the way Dave just described. Are you allowed to bill the township? Could you bill every time they go out for an automatic alarm? And because if you could,
some automatic alarms that are true calls.
Yes.
So you're billing for true calls.
No, but you would have to, is there, if you're allowed, to work, then you would be allowed to pick and choose what the grounds are to bill. So obviously, if it's a legitimate, you wouldn't bill.
Me personally, I would be looking for a way to ward off the alarms. I don't want to focus on billing because that's not really a corrective action. We need it to be before that billing occurs, this corrective action to occur, which leads me to the IMT type of.
The inspection would certainly, hopefully cut back, if you had truly had an annual inspection every year, that should cut back on the malfunctioning alarms, that type of thing. That's not gonna eliminate the popcorn and the, the steam in the shower or whatever, but I don't know why it'd be interesting to see what percentage of those are actually a malfunctioning alarm as opposed to a nuisance alarm, but.
I do think an annual inspection, one of my concerns from a community risk perspective, I can think of at least 2 calls when I was personally on where we went in and the alarm system was actually on test and they had it on test for who knows how many weeks or months leading up to that. Because there was an issue with the system and they didn't want to call it out. So my concern is, we get something like that happens, we have a legitimate fire and it's going to get ugly real quick if that building cannot be evacuated. So I think the yearly inspection has a merit from that perspective.
And we've also made adjustments from the request, I think it was 2 years ago, to try to reduce call volume for volunteers and the burden on volunteers. And some of these systems have been put into a situation now where there have to be 2 activated alarms for us to actually get dispatched. So a lot of those that we're now responding to when we go in there, we see that the system is already in trouble mode for something else. And that is why we're actually getting dispatched. So it's kind of band-aiding the problem. It's not necessarily making the corrective action, like he says. So that registration process may be beneficial.
So we're reporting them as false fire alarms.
We have 2 different false alarm
Yeah.
reportings. One is police and one is fire
Okay.
that we've
Yeah.
done.
What's your description, Dave, of the actual alarm being either tampered with, it's not working right, they haven't updated it, whatever that case is? That would be perhaps solved by the inspection, the yearly inspection. But is that on them to make the inspection?
Yeah, I believe
Is that-
township fire that. So maybe that's something to look at down the road, but you have to have enforcement. What I've seen is they rather pay a fine, a cheap fine, than get a service call out there for a couple thousand to fix the system. And it's just, we've gone to some same places and it's the same old run around every time. They don't have a clue about anything. And it's not safe for the people staying there. And, it's also a hassle and a time killer on our end because we're sitting there trying to troubleshoot an alarm that they don't have a code for or don't know where this zone is. And we need some type of enforcement to make this. And I think it'll help definitely limit some of the crappy calls that we go to all the time.
So basically what would happen is the township would write the ordinance to read that every business owner would need to have their alarm inspected on an annual basis. Whether or not you want to put a fee back to the township, that's fine. But they are all hooked up to a central alarm agency somewhere, maybe it's Commonwealth or another alarm company, Select Security. And they're the ones that they should be calling, hey, come inspect my alarm. But the fee could go towards the township for that inspection. And then they'll have to also pay that alarm company. It's not cheap, but it is reducing community risk.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go over what I've heard so that I make sure I'm getting the right direction. So an enforcement mechanism is needed. Annual inspection every year of businesses only. What about residents?
Residents are not frequent flyers.
And let's not disincentivize residents from putting
They don't really get that billing mark.
When I look at a list from 24, there's maybe half a dozen residential addresses on here, so.
Be specific about how we define false alarm as a nuisance or human error versus the alarm actually
Malfunction.
goes off and, okay, malfunction.
Right now, we have a decision tree made up at the station. This happened, this happened, this happened, write the report. And even when I had talked to the previous township manager, he had wanted stuck elevator alarms. I mean, that's the same as an automatic fire alarm, whereas we submit a person, if we don't find anybody in the elevator when we get there, report. If we do find someone in the elevator and rescue them, that does not generate a report.
Okay, we want a registration of alarms with a fee. I'll inquire with Manheim Township about their collection. And there must be a connection to a central alarm agent. I mean, did I get the big ideas?
Yes.
Are there any others?
I think the difference I've seen this year or in the last 2 years, and I think some of the chiefs can speak to this, is that some of these actual central alarm agencies have changed ownership. And they are actually the root cause of the problem. So they're getting calls to put the system in test. They're not doing their job properly. So there's gonna be some finger pointing in this process as well, just to be mindful of for our business owners, because there are people that are trying to be responsible, but the companies have changed hands. And we're seeing that happen quite often as well. So.
Wouldn't a simple discretion of saying whether or not fire department services were required or not, if they weren't, then that would be considered false. If they had to provide, like, I'm not sure how many would, well, I guess in the end, but at least if the services aren't needed, and in fact, I think this week I've heard 3 or 4 times that caused by cocaine was caused by this, no services needed. Everybody. But so maybe that could be a simpler differentiation. Put the control of that on the fire department and their staff to make the decision whether or not.
It was the other question, whether the fee structure was enough.
So keep the current fee structure, change the fee structure. Thoughts on that?
Still at the challenge of collecting it.
Yeah.
Whatever Manheim Township is doing, I would say.
Again, to Dave's point, he wants to be proactive. He doesn't want to have to be going out on alarms. He wants the problem fixed. So therefore, and I thought you had it in the old ordinance that there was a credit given if the problem was negotiated with the township and the problem was fixed. Do you remember anything like that, or?
There was, we actually negotiated with one landowner to reduce their, I think, $20,000 bill to $16,000 after they put a substantial amount into their fire system.
So again, it could cost them $500 to get somebody out, if it's not a real big property, to do the annual maintenance on their system and maintenance and inspection. The sooner you get them to that $500 point and say, okay, this is it, you either get people out here or this is going to keep going. I don't know if that would be the incentive for them to get somebody out, because they're going to pay the money anyway. You guys can't.
There's some to understand, they do system tests through lines too. Every so often, they do line testing. Make sure the signal and everything, so everything is computerized, they can go in and check the system. Just so you. But they don't actually send somebody in. They can go through electronic, go through the system.
So if we went back to one example, as you mentioned, particular business that's on the west side of Lincoln Highway, in our, I forgot her name.
They mentioned any names.
We didn't say the name, no, what we're calling our commercial, the streetscape, the Lincoln Highway.
Lincoln Highway.
Lancaster, Lincoln Highway, Lancaster. So on the west side of Lincoln Highway, Lancaster, there's one that's a frequent flyer. And I see a report here that there's a number 7 there for that, of billing of incidents there. Well, what's gonna, as we just discussed, if that's a case study, what would make them finally change their alarm system and update it? We're saying perhaps the fact that they could lose an occupancy because
Without
They're
an
not doing
enforcement mechanism, we can talk about numbers all we want, but
that's what I'm saying.
You get a ticket.
Three. You have to reapply and you have to repay your fee for certificate of occupancy as well.
That sounds like something that would influence someone.
Could you couple that? Whatever the alarm fee is with your reoccupancy, like, hey, if you want to apply for this, then you need to pay your fee. Is that possible or not? Because the other half of that is, what I was hearing from the initial part of this conversation is some of the fees we're currently going on, it's not really value add to go chase it down. It's waste of time, lack of works. So what if we made it worthwhile? What Dave is approaching here is basically proactive. The reactive side of this would be the alarm fee is being charged from false call, false whatever we go out to, whether it be nuisance or not, decide that later. So I guess my question is, what if we really made it worth the township's while that instead of adding 50, the alarm doubles? If I was a hotel owner and all of a sudden I got 8 alarms and I get slapped with a very large fee, I would want to rather get my system squared away for the $1,000 than to potentially pay $2,000. Right now, it's easy to sell a room for $150 and not worry about the $50.
Well, let me ask you this, just a hypothetical, to play devil's advocate. If we have a business that comes in and they put an alarm system in, they register the alarm, you know, usually these are written that in the first 30 days that the alarm's in service, you get a free pass, right? Because you're trying to figure it out. So let's say there's an issue and fire company comes out, they get someone out there to look at the issue, they get a repair of the system, more alarms. So now their bill's going up here and there, right? Because they are doing the right thing by getting somebody out there to repair it. But we continue to jack up the cost of the fines because we're doubling.
Yeah. Maybe that's something we could write in a clause, and this is just me thinking here, that if you can prove that you're trying to take forward action on it, I've had a service tech out here for this, and this reason. The fire company also came out for this, and this reason, same day. If you can show you're actively trying to make amends for your system, I think that is actually semi worthwhile. I would rather go to a occupancy that is trying versus just a thought.
Problem with all these is the devil's in the details, and the definitions and, you know, it's, the more of the stuff you write, the more you're opening up. And I tend to agree. And remind me again, what was the reason for resetting it quarterly as opposed to annually?
I was not part of making
Okay.
that ordinance.
Because
so-
one of the things I'm thinking is if, I personally, wouldn't it make more sense to do it an annual basis and then start to ratchet it up as opposed to resetting it every quarter and then giving them a free, whatever, $50 one again? Because really what we're after is we don't want to go there, you know, more than once or twice at the most in a year, hopefully. And if they get a free reset every quarter, it kind of seems like, I don't know, that seems like a lot of resets, but.
So does that just require an amendment to the ordinance by the township supervisors then?
Well, to rewrite it.
Because that would sort out a lot of these onesies and twosies really wouldn't have much of a problem. Really what the ones concerned about are the 5s and 7s and 10s. And so that would maybe be a way to eliminate some of the concern you're talking about too, where.
Yeah, I mean, 3 of these alone would significantly, the rate of response. I mean, that's.
The other side of this too is how many fire alarm systems in this township and commercial buildings are actually functioning properly, that are actually getting called into the alarm companies. That's the whole nother side of this, that's where, as to your point, to the enforcement side comes in. And we hold them accountable because we have a lot of people that are passing through this area and working and shopping in this area, and they need to be safe at the end of the day. I mean, it's tough for anyone. I hate giving people a fine or, you know, pushing for fines for companies, but at the end of the day, like, hey, we're trying to reduce our call volume. It's putting a strain on our resources, and they have to have some kind of level of accountability.
You know, the companies are doing this, but I think in our case, I know sometimes what we do, I don't think they even get reported again. If it's a company that is, again, being proactive and we know, like, they're doing everything they can, and I don't know, Chief can correct me if I'm wrong, we're basically, yeah, we, you know, we're not even looking to fine them or punish them or whatever. It's, they're taking care of it, great. And then, you know, we're not looking to create a bunch of paperwork and a hassle for them and for us and for you guys, when the intent of all this is to have a functioning alarm system. So I guess what I'm wondering there is even there, if some of that discretion could be on the fire companies themselves, in the sense that when they get out there, as Jeff, I think, said, and this landowner, this business is cooperating and doing everything in their ability to make this problem go away. I don't know, maybe that report doesn't get fouled or whatever. I don't know what the.
Well, you were basically saying that, Dave, you have some latitude there to decide where does this fall?
We do. I mean, if somebody ends up in the dryer at one of the facilities and it smokes up the dryer room, that doesn't get written up as an automatic alarm report, even though the automatic fire alarm activates.
Since there's already some discretion there on the fire company to decide whether this is a problem or whether, it's an innocent state.
And a lot of times, once we get a number of alarms, the 23, the one that's at the eastern end of the township, I know that we have, hey, this place is becoming a big problem, and this is the amount of alarms that we have responded to. And I know I've sent that email back then it was calling, and had sent that to the township. As an FYI, maybe some intervention is needed here. How far that got, I don't know, but I did make contact. The other part of this, and this is kind of off topic maybe, but the nuisance hotel ordinance that involves the police department, how's that working out? I mean, are we able to collect people? Do that, or has that improved the situation?
So we've collected so far.
The chief has reported positive outcomes.
Right. There is more self-reporting going on than there was in the past. So if a hotel self-reports an issue, that's not noted as a nuisance.
Okay.
So Terry, you have some good points on doing a little bit of research on this. We have talking tools to talk with the board about it. I think the other thing obviously is the character of our township with our hotel concentration. That certainly is one of the issues here, but I agree that anytime you can work with our people, let's work with them. If they're intentionally being, non-cooperative, that's a different story, but any other comments on that, on the alarm issue? And I think we've had contact with with Rob, right? Patterson, he brought it up. Okay. All right.
So our intent would be to take these ideas to the board, and then if the board agrees, revise the ordinance, bring it back to the ESC for comment, and then go to the board for adoption.
I got a question. So say it's a commercial building and they're doing a test on the system, that's what the system tests. So like if an outside agency is coming out, working on checking the smoke detectors, alarm goes off, you guys get a call, we get a call. We get a tell county run around, county comes back, says, doing a test on the system, they've got to put the system on test. You guys still send a bunch of fire trucks out, or you just send
Like
them?
that, we changed to non-emergent mode and we still respond in to confirm.
You hear tell that's a false alarm? And you tell them, even though there's an alarm,
We've never gotten that information back. Never information back from her.
There are many times when the people will want to cancel the fire department very quickly. So they will call in a false alarm, but they won't give a reason why. Okay, we have already responded to places where no valid reason, and they actually had a fire there, but they just didn't want us there. So that's why we always need to respond and confirm. Now, if it's recorded, or false or an automatic alarm, okay, and they give the proper passcode and they give a reason, we're still going to drive there to meet with them and say, is everything okay? But it won't be an emergency response right like sign.
And you also have the latitude, if that happens too many times, to say, I've got to report this differently now.
Yes.
yeah, that's, I was just.
There's also been times that we've taken that, and when you have the 2, 3, 4 times in one day, kind of have a heads up what number 5 is going to be. That maybe we won't take rigs out of the street, we'll make it a duty officer and like drop down leisure once again.
No matter what, we're gonna improve it. It's false.
A lot of people try to call you off the site, they don't even advise. So I'm not gonna take up, I think we're going there.
People that don't even work at the company anymore be listed as the person trying to call you on.
Yeah.
It's sort of easy to see that is the safest thing to do.
I just
But
want
it's
to-
a responsible thing to do. Work it out later, but Tara, do you believe you have enough information?
I do.
What you need?
Thank you all.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that discussion. So we'll move on to item 5, a new business. I do believe comprehensive plan was on our list here. We thought we were gonna have our man here, our consultant, but they're not here.
Right, unfortunately, he could have been here the last 2 times, but not tonight. So he would like to, if it's okay with the chiefs, if I can give out your information to him, he'd like to meet with you all to get some input for emergency response for the comprehensive plan from your perspectives. So if I'm.
Does that work with?
See you nod.
Chip?
Can you define that a little bit, the township's comprehensive plan they're
What is
working
the
on? What
township's
is that?
comprehensive?
And just kind of so they're looking for feedback from the fire companies to help township better understand.
Emergency services in general, fire in general, because he's already spoken with police chief, as well as your thoughts and ideas about land use, development, zoning. So if it's not the fire chiefs, then tell me who it should be.
So they
There's
probably,
some leadership there that I think you always have to keep in mind for the fire companies, because it's usually at every fire company, I can only speak for a couple, but there's admin and there's operations. Or the business side and operations side.
Be chief and president if it was just for example, but that chief is fine with as a contact, he can initiate that.
it'd be great if the consultant could provide maybe a list of questions and topics for them. They could take it to a meeting. The chief and officers can decide what kind of feedback we need, maybe.
Depending on the types of questions we may send to somebody
Yeah,
different.
put it on their agenda for their meetings. So I would assume they're doing the same thing, their ambulance, LEMSA, they're talking with all these folks. The topics such as the development that's going on in the township,
It's one of the top.
4-story buildings, how they're located, so forth. Okay. And now 5B, tow policy. We've talked about this a little bit at the board level, but go ahead, Tara.
We have, and so I can't honestly remember who asked me to look into this, but it goes hand in hand with no pun intended, with the hazmat removal from the county. So I was asked to look at the tow policy when that relationship fell apart. And whether or not tow companies should be required to carry more or different equipment. And we did look at our tow policy. We found that really the knowledge wherewithal is not there for the tow operators to deal with hazmat. So the current Lebanon County agreement is what we need to utilize unless we figure out a way to work together on hazmat situations outside.
Can I interject? I think most of our was for large spills because of Route 30, Route 340. Getting somebody, there's several tow companies in the area that are equipped and can rapidly respond to help us contain a large spill. So I think that was more the direction, not necessarily, it's considered a hazmat incident, but we're not talking chemicals leaking out of a trailer. Yeah, we need Lebanon, we need somebody that can handle that. We're talking large spills, something that we need help containing if we're able to contact, just for example, Knowles Towing. They are set up to come out and remove large diesel spills, large spills, and they can get out quick. They have a rapid response team. Wayne's Towing, somebody like that, somebody like Alliance, that they're not really set up for that. those two are one of the major players in the area and they work together and they're set up to do this. So I think that was where we were going is how much authority do we have to go around the police and say, make that call and say, hey, we need these guys to get out here now, like to help us.
Well, and this is where it comes into the tow policy, because that is how the next person on call towing is set up through that tow policy, right? Yes.
I think the big thing is, and I brought this up with the chief the other day at the safety meeting, that do we have a policy for a large, heavy vehicle, a rotation? Because he said, I've talked to different police officers, there is none. They have it for smaller vehicles. You know, you get Alliance to Paradise Custom to whoever. But I said, what are we doing with the big rigs? And, you know, you get something rolled over, it's gonna take more than one tow truck or one large vehicle to pull something over again. I think, you know,
It is
That's
not
where-
set up.
Hmm.
The tow policy is not set up.
well, here's the kicker. And we had a large vehicle, tractor trailer and a dump truck run together. And this was down in Savage. And the officer said, do you know who can do what? And I said, yes, right away. And we called and they came out, it was taken care of. No problem. But, and no disrespect to any of the new officers, but sometimes even the new officers, we have to go over for a regular vehicle accident and say, hey, don't forget to call for a tow or we're out there forever until something's happened. And I think a lot of them don't understand the spills and things like that, because we will get called out for sometimes spill control. And we have a little puddle of oil that gave big. If they have a tow truck coming, they're the ones that are supposed to handle that kind of stuff. I mean, when this thing started, Tara, I sent you that email inviting different people from the township to come down. And when the hazmat team was no longer running calls with us, I made 2 phone calls to large tow outfits that if we have a large spill, I'm not looking at acids, I'm not looking at stuff like that. We need somebody to come out and help us. And do I really want to wait till Lebanon comes down? Or especially when they're in your area sitting, can you come out and help us and get this stuff cleaned up? And they'll supply everything from a Bobcat to a sweeper to you name it. That's my bigger concern than what a regular vehicle accident. However, some of the vehicle accidents we've had recently, the one company came out and we had a heck of a time. And not we, I'm talking to the police and I, to talk to the people to get them to understand what we were attempting to do and get this cleaned up because it was off the road into a field. And some of them they should be able to handle it, and they had a rough time doing it. So, you know, the tow policy, there's 2 big separations here. A regular vehicle accident, a small vehicle, a pickup truck, something like that. And then you've got delivery trucks, even a cargo, a box truck that is loaded with the weight. They can't all handle some of this. And that's what you've got to let these tow companies know, that, look, this thing is this big, or it's full, and you know, it's got this many pounds of whatever in, and yet they could be hauling boxes of mulch or anything, but it's the weight that they can't handle in some of this. And that's the kind of stuff we look for and try to get something set up pretty quick.
You have another hand over here, Tara, whenever. But for years and years, we had hazmat too in Lancaster County, and the fire department can handle a small spill. The smaller tow companies are not set up to handle anything other than a small spill. We can handle a little bit more than a small one, but yeah, a small spill. Plus, they're not trained. There's some training that has to go along with hazmat mitigation. So Paradise Custom, Cabbage Hill, Those guys don't have that training. We always called on, hazmat too, for Lancaster County Hazmat Team, and they would come out. And this is some of the struggle that they're having right now is that, the county feels that they were going above and beyond the duty by using too many supplies or going way too far into mitigating the incident. Whereas the new draft hazmat policy with Lebanon 50 has them basically, okay, they're drawing the line and the ultimate responsibility, and this is through the states, is that the ultimate responsibility of cleanup falls on the carrier or the trucking company. However, when we get on an incident and we tell them that they're responsible, they're calling their dispatcher. Their dispatcher's trying to get a hold of somebody who won't answer the phone because they're asleep, and it just goes around and we're waiting, okay? So we need to call someone who can handle this. Now, there are a few in the area, the Knolls, the Alliance, the Waynes. These guys are all hazmat trained. They have all went out and bought specialized equipment. They are a certified cleanup crew, and they come out with these backhoes, mucho oil drive. They take care of your incident, and that's what we're looking at. Where's our authority lie? Okay, I get it. Paradise Custom or Cabby Chill, they're coming out to pick up the vehicle and we're cleaning up a little puddle of oil or something that's on the smaller side. But ultimately, we would like the authority to contact Knolls, Waynes. Does that sound right?
That's where I was going.
We need like authority, if it's large enough, okay? The way Lebanon's set up with Lebanon Hazmat, they're only gonna do so much of a mitigation. They're gonna wanna call one of those guys anyway. I will use the egg spill that occurred on Walnut Street and Route 30. We had a tremendous amount of rain during the week. One of the egg trucks that from Souders Eggs in Greenfield, okay, the rain filled up the trailer, and when he went around the corner, all of these broken eggshells and everything over the roadway, all over the place. And they called Lebanon Hazmat 50 to come down. Well, they couldn't really do anything either. They ended up having Klein Septic come out and suck that stuff off the road, all right? Who can make that call? That's where we're at. We would like to be able to make that call.
The thing we have set up right now with both Waynes and Knolls, and we discussed it in our three meetings. First off, my concern is time that's spent sitting there waiting for somebody to show up. I have full trust in them to come out and clean up everything. They supply also traffic control. That once they get it to our one call, they brought their vehicles in. You guys can take off and leave. We're good to go. Now, everyone says, oh, that costs a lot of money. I can tell you the bills that the hazmat team was sending out would shock you too. We're at the point where I know that Knolls and you know, am I in tight with them? I've worked with them for years. And now in the last 6 months, I've had vehicles that they were put this, they were state police vehicles that were involved in accidents, and Waynes does most of the towing for them. They've come in and it's picked up, it's cleaned up, we don't do anything. And in fact, the one where I had the truck into the building, I was getting a phone call on the way there that let me know if you need us, we'll be on the way. And if we have to wait for someone to make the decision, you know, I think most of the companies here have enough common sense and intelligence and know what has to be done. But
so you would make that call with police sometime. I realize we have some younger officers too, but you have some that are, they would work.
If they want, they've got to come in with the equipment to clean this stuff up, because who wants Route 30 shut down? 2 lanes of Route 30 for 2 hours, 3 hours.
So Tara, what would you say, what is then from what we've heard, what's wrong with our tow policy?
Well, our tow policy only allows tow companies that have a facility in East Lampton.
Okay.
And that would preclude some of those.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, Tara, some of the small tow outfits are very good for towing. But as far as if you've got a decent spoon with it, they're in trouble. And
We're
that's,
already, yeah, for Lebanon, easy.
So what issues would happen if you amended that policy to not have to be in East St. Peter Township?
So then any tow company anywhere could go on the list, which then how do you know who exactly to call, right? For the police officers who, Steve was saying, some don't even know who to call.
Well, like you said, chief, what are the categories that you want to call one of these other tow companies that have a capacity the others don't? In other words, that could perhaps be added to the policy.
Yeah.
Say it's a specialized need.
you get an example of Leroy, they're in East St. Peter Township. But when they have spill, there's a lot of stuff, they pull people from the different shops that they have to come out and help. They bring equipment from, the one guy that comes with a sweeper, he's a landscaper. So if we have to wait for him to show up, we're out there for quite a while. And, it's not so much, okay, the highway shut down, it's my people out there losing. And this always happens during the day. They're losing their pay. We just want to get them back to work, make things as safe as we can, as soon as we can.
I think you can keep the current tow policy and the tow trucks that are the ones that reside within the township. But there should be a paragraph in there that says that if the fire department determines that there's a major mitigation that needs to be handled, that we have the authority to contact a cleanup crew. And that cleanup crew, their first thing they're going to do is they're going to want to know, who can I send a bill to? And actually, the state of PA says that it's the responsibility of the trucking for the carrier to clean it up. So
And if they have their own people, it could take for hours for them to come out.
I think the authority and jurisdiction you guys have to say.
So we'll need to take that.
And I can tell you, it seems that.
Yeah.
Said to me that, look, if we don't get the tow, we're okay with it. We'll come out and help you get this mess cleaned up.
Guys have really said outwardly is that on any other fire company or any emergency, these guys are the ones that take the responsibility to mitigate the emergency. And all of a sudden, because it's automobiles, vehicles that's significant, all of a sudden they're being taken into the picture. And the reason that was because of the preference on someone complaining about who was calling when, they got more toes than another guy. That's really why the thing got started. It had nothing to do with this. I think that the fire should be permitted to mitigate it just as though it was a building that they could fall in a track of, and part of it down in order to finish putting the fire on, or pushing stuff together, or whatever it may be able to do that.
And you mean when there's a specialized need?
Yes.
Because there's very few municipalities and cities that don't have that same issue with tow companies saying who you choose and who's getting it. There's corruption. Somebody could know this one and they're getting more calls than somebody, that you could put into place. But if it's obviously that truck's on its side, Joe's little tow company's not gonna be able to do much about it. And you're saying, could we modify it to say, the fire company,
It's beyond the scope.
whoever's in it. Let me look at all. Sarah, something we could look at? Yeah. Anything else?
If you would like any input, I'd gladly sit down. And I'm not, I don't care who we get. I just want somebody that's gonna show up and do the job right and get us off the road.
Yeah. Anything else on that? Terry, feel good about that?
Good.
And we don't have anything else there on D on the 2020. Covered that. Okay. And then we have a topic of the, obviously it was in the news, the Lafayette Whitmer Upper Lake compact. There's some updates on that. Tara, I'll let you just begin a conversation on that.
So I informed the supervisors of the compact and I think I've shared with both Whitmer and Lafayette that I am all for finding ways that are, outside of the normal box to move forward and keep volunteer fire companies volunteer here in East Lampeter. We just need all the partners at the table. And it's my understanding at this point that both fire companies have backed away from the compact and will not be moving forward at this time. So I don't really know that there's much more to say about it at this point.
And some of it, we did not have, 2 meetings. We had problems in the summer, which is an issue for our meetings of having people together, but definitely a topic that I believe should start here. At least we start with that discussion. Hey, any new ideas that'll improve safety and perhaps at a secondary level, save us the money, that'd be great. So, anything else on that topic?
It would be nice if it would come through ESC. I know our guys kind of found out about it through social media and or the newspaper or whatever, and they're asking us what's going on. I don't know, which, is fine. Again, I'm not trying to interfere with the autonomy of any of the fire companies, but it would be nice, that type of thing, to have it come through ESC, at least for a discussion, if we could do that in the future. So.
I can speak on behalf of our company, but it did not go through all the proper processes. And so we apologize for anything that happened that may impact the mutual aid and the way that we appreciate working with East Lampeter Township fellow companies. It was not our intention, and kind of caught us all off guard.
Yeah, that's fine. Again, there's no ill feeling on our part. I think it's just a matter of, we'd like to see it go through the process.
Nor the supervisors, applaud the creative ideas. That was great. There were some other issues that, we could troubleshoot, we could discuss. That's what, when you have this many here from, for our meeting, we have a lot of great ideas coming out. So I think lesson learned on that. So we'll see if there's any developments like that or other ideas that we can go with. Okay, next, 5F is our fire tax. Another topic to talk about. Maybe the finance committee would have something to say about it.
So the August budget meeting for the Board of Supervisors, I was tasked with finding ways to figure out our deficit spending. And our deficit spending is over $1 million. And it has been for each year for the last few years. And so at the adoption of the 2025 budget, the board had a tax increase included in that, and that was 5%. But we were also tasked with finding that much in savings as well. So, but that, quite honestly, in the end, that total amounts to about $350,000, right? But we're still deficit spending at $1 million. So I proposed to the board that one option or opportunity is to impose a fire tax, and that fire tax could be looked at in 2 ways. First way is having a 0.15 mil tax that would cover the apparatus portion that the township pays. The other would be a 0.22, the service tax, and that would cover the entire cost of apparatus. And we did check in with West Earl Township because they too implemented a fire tax, I believe in 23 or 24. And they found that the donations to the fire companies after the implementation of the fire tax went down by approximately 10%. However, they didn't have to fundraise for the apparatus. So that the board sent me back here and said, talk with the ESC. I believe one board member captured it really well and said, whether we start talking about this today or whether we start talking about this in 10 years, it's never going to be a good time. But we've got to start talking about it. So here we are.
Feedback.
Getting harder and harder for chicken barbecues and ox roast to pay for this expense. I think we're taxing our volunteers even harder. I think something's got to give. somewhere along the line. Writing's on the wall.
The Rootstown, East Penfield Township, I mean, they've had some pretty big changes here in the past 3 to 5 years with their fire service and the way they do things over there. And I know that they put it on the supervisor's agenda for every meeting. It's in the paper, every meeting to talk about the rising cost of the emergency services. Yeah, just a note also, this caught my eye here on social media was the Lower Paxton Township Bureau of Fire. They wanted to clear up the cost of fire protection in Paxton Township, and they have a long post of how fire protection is supplied, what the millage rate is, how it affects you, where your taxes were, where they are now. I think that is just if you get a chance to look that up, it is just a great feedback coming from the township on how taxes are laid out for emergency services and what it means to the citizen. What it means to the citizen.
Well, we're certainly facing that deficit issue each year now. And incremental tax increases are really something we have to do, but we have to manage them. You know, we understand that we're in a good financial position that we can use reserves. You do that forever. And if something is probably inevitable, it's better to do it sooner than it is later. So it is a serious topic for us for this year's budget. But I think identifying exactly what it's for, I mean, just the fact that you call it a fire tax does resonate, I think, with some people to understand. The beauty of this township, from my standpoint, you guys have been doing a lot longer than me, the fire, is that we have 4 distinct fire companies. They all have their own unique personalities and cultures, yet you still can cooperate on things. And we have great fire service, especially where I live. I can go any direction. I have great fire service, but this issue is something we talked about each time here. We talked about the finance committee, or what should they talk about? It's definitely something there. So any other comments and feedback we can take back to the board?
I may continue with, it's my understanding, and correct me that I'm wrong, but I am understanding that East Lampeter Township doesn't have any more funds, no more income to match the expenses that are being requested, that we are at a break-even point now, that the infrastructure and the current real estate assessment cannot support an increase in expenditures. Am I saying that correctly?
So our revenues based on assessed values from 2018 are stagnant. And on some properties are lower than 2018 because of assessment appeals. And our expenses are exceeding all of our revenues. They're not, they're exceeding by almost $1 million.
So something needs fixed. It's great to say that the fire companies need more money and that we need to increase the amount and we need to change this. But if there's no more funding to go, something is broken or something needs fixed.
Well, I'll tell you one that's broken is healthcare. And our large expenses are a police force and benefits and staff that have to be paid. We have, like, you can shop around, but we use, consortium power of many to look for the very best deals we can in terms of healthcare. But it's again, through the roof.
So we're basically waiting on reassessment or more.
With reassessment, you can't increase your tax level right away.
So what happens when more construction occurs within East Lampeter Township? Can we benefit?
So yes, there will be increase.
Eventually.
That was typically 3 to 6 months after a CO.
This problem is almost like the affordable housing problem. If there's not enough affordable housing,
We are looking at what are some different things we have to do to cut costs. That margin that we can do that in, and I know because I worked in the school district, it's very much the same because personnel costs are very high. So you're limited in those things you can really control. Doesn't mean you don't try to control them, but it's a tough deal. I mean, health insurance up last year, 17%
This year, and we're looking at 25% this.
25 this year.
can we look at zoning and try and modify zoning to allow different types of construction?
So we have modified the zoning significantly since 2016, and we've been continuing to do so to allow higher density development and intensity of development where we have services.
That's what we did with Rockville. Not everybody's happy about it, but it's a development. And, that and Greenfield North and, some of these larger parcels and that are building up. Yeah, we're hoping that certainly school district we hope that's going to help the tax base, but
We've allowed, accessory dwelling units with single families. We've allowed accessory dwelling units with commercial to increase the uses on a property. We've allowed principal uses in combination. Our zoning ordinance is extremely flexible with what uses can be put on properties. From anywhere from R1 to C3.
I'll just, if I may just comment a little bit on the fair tax aspect of it. So I hesitate to even say this because I know I'm probably going to be a minority of one, but I will just kind of give my opinion on it and take it for what it's worth. I know that in the past, we've always kind of been in favor of not doing the fair tax for numerous reasons. And I totally understand that there are pros and there are cons to the fair tax. And the pros obviously is, to raise more funding for the fair service. It's an equal taxation of everybody. And I get it eliminates the need to do as much fundraising and there's all those things. I just think on the flip side, there are some cons too. And if we do that, it will change to some extent, for better or for worse, the nature of the fair service in the township. I know for myself, just philosophically, I've always been more in favor of having the fair companies try to engage through the community cooperatively to raise the funds as opposed to more of I'll use the word, some people won't like it, but more of a coercive model of taxation through the township. So I think that's the way I look at it. That's the way I would like to see it. I totally understand that I'm probably vastly outnumbered in that view, but I think it is still a view that I just want to express it. So it's, it's on the record. And
We are out in the community
I think I think Lafayette is one where, I think
Share a risk with you, with having a fire tax. So
that's one part of it. I guess the other part I would have a couple of questions would be, one would be, and I know we've talked about this before, and I know there's pros and cons, but why implement the fair tax as opposed to just taking the regular township millage rate up and increasing it? What is the benefit of, I know that.
This would be in addition to.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is there's no police tax, there's no works department tax, there's no
Operating.
Yeah, I'm saying the operating as opposed because of and I know we're already using, I guess what I'm asking is where's the threshold or what's the.
So with the fire service tax, what we do with the apparatus funding right now is that goes into a separate fund account. With the fire service tax, that would have to go into a separate fund account as well, has to be set aside. Public Works and police are out of general fund. So yes, your taxes pay for Public Works and police out of general fund. General fund is a little more, you can use this fund here to pay for this, and that.
Theoretically, the general fund tax could increase the millage and that funds could be used for whether it's police, fire.
Well, and currently, general fund is used.
That is
for fund.
right. That was that was essentially I think the point I was making is that we could call it a fair tax, raise funds through that, or raise the general. And again, I understand the part of you're being transparent with the taxpayers. This is what the money's being
Right.
raised for. That's what it's being used. So yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I just think that, again, I think it will, definitely impact the nature of the fire service moving forward. To have the fire service tax. I mean, the obvious thing is once that's established is anytime there's a financial problem, it's gonna be pretty easy to come back and say, hey, we got a fire tax that's, but, and again, I just see the, as a volunteer part of it, a huge part of that, and I think success in the long run is, again, we've talked about this many times, is that engagement with the community. And the fundraising is a huge part of that. And I understand that each company is different. I understand some companies don't want to do any fundraising, and I get that. Again, I'm just expressing what I think is kind of my opinion, personal opinion. I have to go back to the fire company. We haven't talked about it as a fire company in a number of years. So I definitely would be interested in going back and getting their take on it. I know in the past, again, I could be wrong. I don't want to assume that, again, we may be the only ones that feel that way, but that's just a point of view that I just want to make sure that is expressed, so.
So, Paul, I think if I'm understanding correctly, I'm hearing it, and Terry, others can correct me, but what I'm hearing is that we're operating at such a deficit at the township level that the fire tax is going to be of assistance in helping us to reduce that deficit, because you can only raise general fund tax so much. And we're facing assessments that are also going to create a pause where there can be no other increases to help mind the gap that continues to grow. Am I understanding that?
In part, yes.
Or,
So when the new assessment, if the new assessment happens, we actually might have to decrease the tax millage rate so that we don't increase so much, right? Because you can't.
It
in the
needs to
first
be
year.
revenue neutral essentially, that's the concept.
So if I went to the board in August and said, we need a 15% tax increase every year for the next 3 years, and we still won't be out of deficit. They came back and said, look at 5%. So what other things can we do? So this millage for a fire service tax would put those funds aside, right? Although the board does that now with the general fund, they can move that money back out with a fire service, not that they would, but with a fire service tax that has to go towards what it's intended.
The money's budget, if you're gonna take it this year, you're taking from the general fund to put toward the fire expenses. Next year, if there was a fire tax, you're not gonna have to do that because there would be money being used by the fire tax. So therefore, that other money is being used elsewhere. So it's just a matter of, as Susie said, you're really on the cap because on raising tax in the general fund. And the reason I asked that is because fire is one of the few, if any, expenses in the township that the community helps fund their own and contribute. They're not really contributing to the parks, they're not contributing, discretionary, voluntary, for parks, they're not doing it, maybe, but they're not doing the parks, they're not doing police, they're not doing everything else. So just the term opportunity saying, yeah, why are we thinking on this stuff? Your explanation is really simple. That's the additional source of revenue that you get your hand. So probably.
Well, that specifically sets it aside for fire service. Specifically sets it aside for fire service.
Yeah, but again, that's like, because if you're gonna set it aside, then it's up in the general fund. So that increases, which is that you weren't gonna put 350,000 in to the fire service because
I think what the point Tim's trying to make, and maybe I'm wrong, but would be even if the fire tax went up, it doesn't necessarily mean more funds will be allocated to the fire service. It just means that those specific ones will be earmarked for that and cannot be used for anything else, which will free up funds that without the fire tax would have come from the general fund into the fire service, so.
We're the ones that take the hit on it.
We take the PR hit in a sense, but yeah, I'm not saying that's all bad either. Again, it is what it is. If the fire service is getting the tax money, then, you know, we shouldn't be afraid to accept the perception that we're taking, you know, those funds.
And we're aware that the worst case kind of scenario when you start going down this road is now you're threatening your volunteer fire service. That is a part of your community. That's, you know, there's so much more to talk about that. And I think you've made that point in the past too, Paul. I mean, kind of understand that. You're at a point where I think people, they understand how important it is. And when you do give people something specific that tax is going for, it's a little easier to swallow, especially with your community connection. And this idea that we have struggled a bit with volunteerism and the fundraising, and I don't think those things will stop. I mean, knowing what is going on in a neighboring township that did it and what happened to them. I can't always say that. You guys know better about the other fire companies, but I see the community connection with ours. I'm not sure that would happen, but we're going to have to continue to look at these things that we haven't done before because of these deficits. We just have to.
To that point, you know, we've obviously been out there pounding the pavement for a capital campaign for our truck and whatnot. And, you know, looking at like this year's fund drive, yes, the dollar number of our dollars we're bringing in is actually up a little bit, but our percent of return is at an all-time low of 5%. And that was sent to 5,000 houses. So, you know, when we look at it, hey, the whole community is benefiting from the fire service, the participation in that continues to decrease. So I think, you know, from that perspective, you know, we had a fire tax and then we covered operating expense, apparatus, whatever. It doesn't mean we're going to totally stop fundraising. What it will do is we're not going to feel like we're having our backs up against the wall and have to have an event every other month to bring funds in the door, which now frees up manpower to actually run the organization.
I think it'll take a huge educational blitz to help prevent your concerns.
And again, there's multiple ways of looking at this. And again, I think my big concern would be over the long term is just that I just know, again, having watched the way politics play out for 30, 40 years, is that when that source of income is there, is pretty easy, a lot easier if the next time, and because we've seen this throughout the country's history and every tax, whether it was Social Security, Medicare, property taxes, federal tax, all of this stuff it's pretty easy then to come right back 2 years, 5 years later. And you know what, that's not enough. And as you start to ratchet that up, I think it's going to take a lot of people that currently, just use myself an example, that have been very, and again, philosophically committed to this idea of volunteerism and community engagement and all that type of thing. And you start to lose that interest pretty quick when it's like, why am I even bothering? Because there's taxes up another couple percent and, you know, I might as well. And so again, I'm not saying not everybody thinks that way, but that's the danger I see that and oftentimes you don't see that in the first year or two, but over 10, 15 years. And again, maybe that's the only alternative we have. And if that's the case, then yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just think we really need to be aware that there's a lot of different forces in play here. And I think we need to go into it fully aware of steps to it. Taking the trade-offs for making. So
We've been really benefited living in this township though for many years. If we think about it, we haven't had tax increases. So this is where we're at as a result of not having those over a very long time. So I think we also can celebrate that we haven't had to pay. So in those savings, I think it's something for us to keep in mind.
I've said enough on my end.
You know, I really appreciate it. I mean, definitely, this was a good deep dive into that. You see these sides, conditions of the, you know, the price of these new machines that we need, the apparatus, the prices, you know, cost of living in general, but then, you know, the community aspect and volunteer service. Definitely some good pieces to talk with the board about. Any other comments on that?
Good question. Did I calculate right? If it was a $250,000 home, 0.22 mil would be about $55.
I didn't do that math.
Okay, do I take the number? That's 250, 0.22.
Yeah.
So $250,000. Most homes today are that or more. That would be $55.
That's pretty darn reasonable for, yeah, I mean, $55 is pretty darn reasonable in my opinion.
Let's Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you have $2-3 million, it just kind of is what it is. You get the money, you know.
The person who's writing $100 check to you isn't saying, that's covered with the tax now.
Well, that's what's.
But the other thing is, again, 3, 5, 10, 15, it's not gonna be $55, and it's gonna be, substantially more than that. And again, it is what it is, but at least,
Makes everybody pay their fair share. I mean,
Yeah.
with the fund drive decreasing, our officers' meals been on the decline for meals, chicken barbecues aren't going that well. To me, it makes everybody pay their fair share. My brother puts it to me this way: why do you have to volunteer to volunteer? Why do you have to fundraise to volunteer your time as a fireman? Like and when he said that to me, I thought, it's an outdated concept. And like, I understand, Paul, I understand where you come from, but I look at it this way: we're not a small little village in Whitmer anymore. We're a suburban fire department. We're talking extreme, tremendous growth in the northern side of our township and our running area. Something's got to give somewhere along the line. It's unsustainable. And I don't want to think that I'm not discrediting you.
and I think it's a, I
We have
understand.
two different sides of this township, and we got not so much growth on your end, and our end's exploding. And so something's got to give somewhere along the lines. And I mean, I sit on our supper committee, I'm there for just about every darn Oxford, but my God, I'm not gonna lie to you, if I could take that off my plate, I'd be a pretty happy fella, It just, something's got to give somewhere along the line, and I understand that, taxes, I don't like taxes as much as the next person, but it's the reality. I personally rather pay a fire tax than pay for some other stupid program that serves no purpose, in my opinion.
I
What
understand.
happened to the emergency services tax? It got renamed. That was like per capita, wasn't it?
I don't know that answer.
You know what I'm talking about? Originally, it was, I thought the emergency services, and then it was opened up 7 years ago. They used to make it 10.
So it's around 200.
It's all it takes.
Been a while since I looked at it.
Yeah, if I recall, that money doesn't necessarily have to go into emergency services.
Right, they opened it up for you. I'm just saying, originally that was, again, that was there. In the name of emergency services.
Well, again, good feedback.
So can you tell us a little bit, Tara, what's the process? I mean, if we go back and talk to our companies, come back and discuss, in the meantime, like what's happening, or you'll give feedback from your, just how soon does decision get made? What's the process look like?
So the next board workshop for budget is scheduled for late October.
Okay.
The board has to put out the budget for public review at their November meeting. It has to be publicized, and they have to adopt it at their last meeting in December, which is about the 16th. It's either the 15th or 16th. I'm sorry, I don't have the.
So we would have another ESC meeting between now and then, but the budget process will be well down the tracks at that point.
So as I asked the chairman to set aside the finance committee, maybe that's something you go back to your, excuse me, your companies, you talk about it, and you come back to the finance committee. And report back to the township so that we can.
And that would at least, keep us organized, a place where you're going with the folks that were on finance. Did a great job before. Anything else on that topic?
Lafayette sent out 5,436 mailers, fund drive mailers. We got back 511. 10%.
Is it 10%? No matter how many we send, it's been 10%. 10%.
It's generally a lot of the thing. And I think the other dynamic that's easily forgotten is, in our area in particular, yes, everybody looks at it and says, oh, there's a ton of businesses there, and there is. The problem is when you start to look at them, a lot of those are corporately owned. There are people from out of the area. They're not vested in the area. You know, we talked the manpower issue, we go back to early 2000s, you know, we pulled 6 guys, easily 6 to 8 guys easily from 3 to 4 locally owned businesses. None of those businesses are in existence anymore. And so that's the dynamic that's changing, is you have these companies coming in who are not vested in the community. And so even we're finding out with the truck campaign, it's been a very big struggle. We're getting the same donors for the truck campaign that we traditionally get. We're not getting a ton of new donors. We're getting some. But as we've been really pounding the pavement, and that team has hit the pavement hard, with numerous community members involved that aren't even members of our organizations out fundraising for us as well, we're not seeing new money coming in the door. It's all this, a lot of the traditional, some, but majority of it is the traditional companies that we've gone to in the past and had. Yeah, so when you look at it from the fact that everybody's benefiting, essentially, there's only a small handful that are really paying.
So, not to mention any names, 2090 Lincoln Highway East, I send in every store that's in that facility and the facility management. I got one back. One from the restaurant.
So Paul, can I ask you to round up the finance committee?
Get the band back together again or something. I can send an email out here, and I guess the company will have to let me know. I'll have to dig up my old email, see who was even on it, but I don't have to let me know. I think we had two people from each company. Is that what we're thinking?
That's what.
Okay.
I have my email.
Yeah, I'll find it. I'll send an email. I think I'll try and remember who was on. Yeah, I'll probably do that. I'll copy you on there so that you're aware of what's.
I appreciate everyone and comments about this. Because we
Very good.
really need to.
Very good, very respectful, but just trying to get, I think everybody understands the situation we're in. And it's not uncommon in municipalities. It's funny, it seems like it's almost as if the old guard of the supervisors, they convince you to run for the board right when the deficit spending started. So that's realizing that.
Still stuff though. Even though we need more revenue, we don't have that balance.
Taking out of capital reserve.
Yeah, the costs are going up. Okay, let's go to G. That's just around the horn. Start with you, Tara.
Okay, I wanted to pass this out to everyone. If you haven't seen it, there is a fire service operations in Chester County on November 10th. Interested in attending through PSATs. And the other document that you had in your packet is the workers' comp. So if there's any items that you wish to add to the workers' comp list, please get those to me. Okay? I think I've talked enough tonight.
Okay.
We need to have a conversation about the QRS offline, that conversation, or is that something that needs to happen here? For the workers' comp list.
I was informed that that wasn't necessarily moving forward here tonight, but if it is.
But in order to,
Yeah, I don't have,
what the deadline on this is the question.
oh, that's not until our next meeting.
What was that topic?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
Activities for the work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Please do this.
and the reason that Susie's asking is because Lafayette is considering adding a QRS. So that would be a medical unit
Yeah.
at the facility, and whether or not that's covered under the workers'
Okay. So there's some research on that yet. Okay, around the horn on fire companies, Whitmer.
A couple events coming up, October 10th, we have our Fall Fest at the firehouse from 6 to 8:30 p.m. October 14th, Child Protect vaccination clinic at the station. October 18th is our first, starts down at 11 until we're sold out. November 12th, we got the community blood drive And then also I should make the ESC aware, we were having some issues with our duty vehicle, 2021 Ford F-150. We had some electrical issues. We spent about $7,000 on repairs. We're still having issues. So we voted as a company to sell it, and we authorized a purchase of a 2026 Chevy Tahoe, which is due in, it might be done by the end of this year. It could be into the new year, depending on availability, but the tune of that's right under 87,000. So outfitted out. So I just wanted to make the ESC aware of that. Not really what we wanted to do, but the Ford's turned into a money pit for us. So we'll get rid of it. And that is all I got.
Lafayette?
That's a couple of different events, obviously, since we met last, but the general Lafayette event, our cadet camp, we're all good successes. Did also do an update on our bylaws. Our membership meetings now switched to the second Monday at 7 p.m. We did that mainly just to free up the first Monday to do department trainings with other departments. One other item similar to Whitmer's situation, but with our building rooftop heat pump that supplies our heating and cooling to the upstairs second floor of the station went out. It was not repairable. That cost to replace, which was not on the list, obviously, that we submitted last year of expenses over $7,500. Cost to replace that was $12,795, and that is in progress. The parking lot patch and seal that has been completed. That was on the list this past year. Already talked about the fund drive. Made an additional building payment, so we're still a year ahead on that, keeping pace with that to pay it off early. Kind of just in general, we had our.
Okay. I was recommended not to.
Okay. They've done some calculations based upon getting off of investments versus basically the interest calculations, and so that was the decision. Had our annual insurance meeting with our insurance company. Again, costs, just like everybody else, continue to increase across the board, even though our claims have remained virtually nil. Seeing it everywhere from auto to liability, you name it. Operationally, we did purchase 3 used MSA gas detectors because we were having a lot of problems with our existing draggers that we had. Annual hose and ladder completed. We did have to make some repairs to some ladders. A couple of them may end up needing replaced. It's a little talking 3 times on apparatus. The extension ladders that we use obviously are a little different than the standard homeowner. The lead time on those is 1 to 2 years at this point. Upcoming events, we got numerous. With Fire Safety Week here, or Fire Safety Month coming up in October, numerous public relations events towards the stations. CD Bonfire will be attending along with a couple trunk or treats. And then of course we've started in motion the Extra Give event that we participated in for several years now. We'll come out there around Thanksgiving. Make this body aware of. Former Chief Scott Hershey is no longer with Lafayette Fire Company. Jeff Keys has been appointed as interim chief.
Thank you, Jace. Ross?
We just have a couple things. We've upgraded our water rescue equipment for the rescue and the squad, and we continue to train our new members. We actually brought in another new member this past meeting, so we're still averaging 1 per month.
Great. Good.
Yeah, I think the only thing I had is just to report a little bit about our marathon. We had another successful event last month, and yeah, everything went well. Appreciate everybody that came out and supported that. And then the other thing, I just on the firefighting side, we did, I think I announced we were working on it the last time, but we did appoint a committee to replace our, I guess it's Utility 2 now, the Yellow Squad, for those of you that are familiar with it. So we have a committee actively looking to replace that with a fire police vehicle. So We'll see what they come back with, but that's all I really had. Don, do you have anything else on the firefighting side or something? Yeah, that's all we have.
Never can get it forward. Still monitoring the weather, we're still in the, bad weather, the hurricane season will be ending in November. Also met with, Tara and the assistant manager, township, ongoing talks about EMA. And we're continuing with that. Also looking at, an event like we have a disaster or some sort, in the township regards to the fire departments or at an event for a pretty long time. I'm looking for a fuel service, be able to fuel apparatus and stuff. So I've been in talks with Tara as well in regards to that. So gave me a lead on something as well as I found out. So working on that, get back with Tara on that, work on policy. That's what. Also working with CD School with John Winter, with the tabletop, urban tabletop on Tuesday, something like that. And I will be participating in that.
Is that all hazards type?
He's
work?
some, he wants to get some players with and just walking some things. So Tuesday, I'll be there for the township and do that and bring a report. And what's going on.
Right.
Other than that, that's about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything from our citizen?
Not here, Mike.
Okay.
Me neither.
Okay. And we do have, next on our agenda is public comment. Any other comments? Anything else to share with us tonight? Online or otherwise?
A quick question, in regards to the fire tax. Would the fire tax funds that would be allocated be greater than or equal than they are now in the general fund?
Because they would be collected over the same amount of time in order to pay for the apparatus, they would be.
So the extra efforts wouldn't decrease by the companies, like one of the chiefs mentioned less barbecues. They would still be responsible for a similar amount that they would be in today's time.
No, if the fire service tax were implemented at 0.22, it would cover the entire cost. So that would be an increase. If it's at 0.15, it would be the same as what the township puts aside now. Because right now it's a shared cost between the fire company and the township.
They would have to continue to develop their budgets, their decisions about, what revenue streams they're going to use and so forth.
Yes, it doesn't take over. Thank you.
One other, if I may, I know it's public comment right now, but if I may add on to that, Tara, has there been any discussion or will there be a discussion, I guess, if there were a fire tax, how would that be allocated between the fire companies? Would that be equal as it is now? Would it be based on population, call volume, tax revenues? Have you guys had any discussion about that at all?
No.
That's a great question.
But that all needs to be
Because
figured
I'm sure
out.
that'll be something we'll be talking about.
And we can use some examples that we have from other townships.
And
Yeah, that would be great. Any other public comments? Okay. Again, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next meeting, Thursday, November